a fair amount about how the United States is at a moment maybe of inflection on the U.S. maritime industry. Some optimism, some hope, some fairly straight talk from the senator as well as to how hard this will be. Now we're going to hear from the experts. We're going to hear from people who know the industry best, who are as likely as anyone to actually order ships and enter them into the new programs that the government wants to enact. A panel of realism, I would say. And what I asked my panelists to do, each of them, just for a few minutes, talk about their companies, talk about where they see the opportunities are. And we'll just go down the line with presidents all, as I may have said. Ryan, we'll start with you.
Hey, Ryan Lynch here. Spoke earlier, as did my colleague David Kim at the Hanwha Philly Yard. I represent the ship ownership division within the Hanwha Group. We're looking to commercialize this next generation of American maritime dominance, whether it's through our Philadelphia shipyard or any support that the shipyard in Korea can give, and of course, being the connective tissue between the ecosystems. It's great to see you all.
Bill?
Good afternoon, Bill Woodhour. I'm the president and CEO of Maersk Line Limited. We are both owners and operators of U.S. flag vessels in the ro-ro and the container segments. And I think that what's in front of us now is something I haven't seen in my 30 years in the business in terms of opportunity. And I think what I'll try and dig into a little bit is that this is a system of systems. We sit a little bit to the left of the final ship rolling out of the yard. What is that infrastructure that's required to support the growth in the U.S. industry?
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Shapiro. I'm the CEO of Liberty Maritime Corporation. We are a privately held U.S. owner and operator of vessels in international trade, participating in the Maritime Security Program and Cargo Preference Programs, as well as the Jones Act. What excites me is that we're talking about maritime in Congress and in the White House. Mostly when you speak about shipping in the United States, people ask you if you're a UPS delivery man. So I'm excited to be talking about ships and maritime today, and that the Congress is focused on our national and economic security.
Erik?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Erik Hånell. I'm the CEO for Stena Bulk. And Stena Bulk, we are an international tanker operator and owner. We are a 100% privately owned company, founded in 1982. Today we run around 70 ships globally, and we usually are around between 70 to 120 depending on market conditions. What we can also say is we actually have 4 American flagships as well today, and we do that in a cooperation with a partner here in US, Crowley. And of course, that's another aspect that we have getting into the last couple of years. Thank you.
And those 4 ships are all in the tanker security program, correct?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Why don't you explain a little bit about what that is, and we'll get to some of the other existing programs.
Yes, I mean, that program is basically means that when the Marine Silver Command is calling for a cargo, we have those vessels equipped and ready to carry the cargoes globally for U.S. Navy.
Okay. So where are the opportunities? Who wants to go first? Josh, where are the opportunities?
Of course, I get picked first. I think the opportunities is that we have a broad goal to build a lot of ships, and a lot of ships need a lot of capital. So being at Marine Money, the opportunity is really for those of you who want to invest in shipping to look at partners. While we're all indirectly competitors, we all have the same need. We need capital. And so the opportunity for all of you in the room that are from the capital markets or finance world is to deploy capital with all of us and some of our US flag competitors that are in the room, and maybe some new entrants. I also see opportunities to expand our economic security base by increasing domestic production and shipping that cargo on US flag vessels.
Bill?
I'm going to pick on something Sal said earlier, which is, when you look at the history going back to the 30s all the way through, big moves have been made in terms of producing assets around innovation and technology. So I think a lot will come naturally, as we've heard from David and Ryan and others, on their own yards and how they can do that best through whatever devices they want, but also what's in the ship. What ships are we going to build? Senator Kelly said before, I had a number of 30,000. He actually said something like 80,000 ships trading internationally. I put the cutoff at 100,000 gross tons. Our ambition is 250, 0.8% of what's out there. So not everybody's going to be in this. It may not all be container ships. It may not be this. What is the red thread between economic security and national security. We've heard about LNGs. Makes perfect sense to me from an economic security perspective, is you want to have something to go out on. Is it MR tankers that the DoD has continually raised their hand to say we need this? Perhaps we start something on a greenfield exercise to say, okay, we start from the ground up, but there's got to be that connective tissue to understand how are we going to fortify the economic security and the national security with this great program, and then grow out from there. We need railroads too, I mean, to a certain extent. So that's really where I see the opportunities, is not just in shipbuilding, but in all related aspects to bring technology and innovation to the forefront.
Ryan, where's the opportunity?
I think I echo everything said so far, but I would add additionally that there is a uniquely American opportunity set around the financing. There's tax equity components here. Of course, we're a relatively high tax nation with respect to traditional flags of convenience. So I think from an infrastructure and private equity standpoint, there's a place. We saw great precedent with the IRA bill about selling off some of that tax equity component to then subsidize and advance FID on these projects. That's in scope, if you read by the letter of the proposed legislation. And again, our hats off to the writers, a lot of credit to that. The opportunity is nuanced, it's specific, but it's also broad. It's economic security, it's maritime security, it's training seafarers for dispatch if there is a sea lift capacity need. Pacific theater is the focus. How do we dominate Pacific theater? Mariners.
Erik, I mean, do you see opportunity here?
Yeah, well, I would say that what we see in here today, it's definitely a major shift that we noticed in the approach to the maritime industry in the U.S. And I have to say I'm really humble about what we see here and now, and the progress that we are hopefully making. And there are definitely a lot of challenges to overcome here. But if those challenges are taken care of, and there are quite a few, then of course there are definitely opportunities to make good investment.
Sal said earlier today, this is the beginnings of a plan, but is there the political will? Does the country have the will to do it? We've never done it except in the presence of a world war. Can we do it without that? What do you guys think? Bill, what do you think? Is the will there? I mean, the president says let me digress a little bit. If you look at the president's executive order, it's a bunch of studies. It doesn't direct money, doesn't make programs, it's studies. Do we have the will?
I think it's a great question. And when you look back at the figures, I think that were presented before, correct me if I'm wrong, around 4,000 ships built over about 4 years, give or take, during the World War II period, done by somebody who wasn't in shipping, I believe, was the first person to come in and take a look at that. I think when you look at this, it's a coordinated effect. If we have it's not only will, but it's how do you coordinate all these parts that need to come together. The mariners to sail the ship. Ships without cargo, not a great proposition at the end of the day. How do we make sure we have cargo to go on board the ship? The general operations, the technology, the infrastructure to support the ship. So I think it's both a matter of will, but also managing complexity. This is something that's never been done before, as far as I can see, in terms of the number of things that we're trying to bring together at once to a common outcome at a common time.
So I think will is one part of it. I think the other part of it, it's like baking a cake. And a good baker doesn't share his recipe, but today I wrote down my recipe for all of you. We need to have the right ingredients, and we need to have the right mix. So I'm going to give you 5 topics and a comment on each of them. We need to talk about capacity, timing, finance, cargo, and most importantly, workforce. I echo what Bill said. We can build all the ships, but if we don't have the mariners to sail on them in this nation, they won't go anywhere. When we talk about capacity, we just heard how many ships Hanwha builds in a year. At 1 to 3 ships a year per yard, we can't produce 250 vessels. So what types of vessels? We want to produce 100 MR tankers. Well, if we produce 100 MR tankers, we can't produce 100 PCTCs or other types of container ships. Timing. When do we need which ship type? Finance, I'll be simple. We need your money to invest in this industry, not only in ships, but in yards as well. Cargo, what cargo will we carry? Will we be coming to the United States with cargo or leaving the United States with cargo? Or are we going to be trading globally and not touching the United States? One of the fundamental elements to the Maritime Security Program is that all of the vessels at some point cycle through the United States to support DoD. And as we've mentioned already, workforce. We have a national mariner shortage. The Ships for America Act calls for a mariner outreach program to increase that. That is probably one of the most critical non-ship components that we need. And so hopefully that recipe can become the will of the people.
Ryan, you want to comment?
Yeah, I would say if anybody here knows a shipbroker, and I'm sure there are many in attendance, I come from a family of shipbrokers. So whether the political will is there or not, I certainly have the grit, along with my principals at Hanwha, to run this down. So we very much believe that the political will is there. Otherwise, we wouldn't be spending the time, energy, and capital on this project. But certainly, it's going to take a village. So that's why it's important, whether it's capital providers, mariner providers, charters, users of the ship, we need you all in this room. We're going to do a lot at Hanwha, but we can't do it all. So we need everybody in this room to band together, call your congresspeople, act with your agency folks, executive branch. Everybody's listening right now. And this stage, and this room, and this week, it's an important step to the next generation of American maritime.
Well, I think Senator Kelly coming up here to speak to us is a pretty good sign. I don't know if you guys agree with that, because I don't think we've had a senator come before to speak to this audience, which is usually focused on something other than the U.S. maritime industry. Any comment on that?
No, I think it's true, and I've never had as many questions coming off the Hill in just basic understanding as saying, can we have a cup of coffee so I can understand what this means? From one perspective, I'll give one and other people give other perspectives. But the intellectual curiosity around what is shipping now is the highest I've seen it in the recent decade.
I think as we look at global tensions rising, wars in different sea basins, the focus is in the headlines now, where we have the attention of the landlocked senator, and we also have the attention of the freshman, congressman on the Hill who now want to talk about shipping, want to talk about shipbuilding, and understand as tensions with China do rise, their dominance in shipbuilding needs to be matched somewhere here in America.
It's of course great to see as well that it seems like both Democrats and Republicans is behind these efforts. And what I think is very important now, I mean, is a four-year term in the office here, and this has to work a lot longer than that. In my view, it's at least 10 years, and maybe we have a change then, but maybe I'm too negative then. But it definitely takes time to change here.
It sure does. So the crown jewel of the Ships Act is the strategic commercial fleet. What's the opportunity there? I mean, what is the good? I'll put you guys a little bit on the spot, because you guys, I'm sure, are going to leap to what the good is. What's the good and the bad in the proposal? Anybody want to take that?
You got a cake recipe?
Something missing, the yeast?
I can speak positively about it, at least from a purely optimistic standpoint. As I mentioned, we at Hanwha, we build the world-class LNG carrier, or the world-class LNG carriers. We hope one day our affiliated yard at Philadelphia will do the same. How do we do that? Well, we stand up ourselves. We have 2 LNG carriers on order. We're running the ACP process. For those who don't know, that's a Coast Guard mandated process for switching into the U.S. flag state. The Ships Act is not an act yet, but our ships are already running their gap analysis. So we're moving with our feet. So we're optimistic. And it speaks to my belief on the political will, or perhaps my stubborn Irish heritage. But one way or the other, we are going to operationalize this. So I do firmly believe that vessels of the USA, and one day vessels built in the USA, will be carrying American LNG. And so we're very excited about that, and that's what I'm so optimistic about.
So I guess I would approach it from the good is eventually we're going to get ships. I'm not going to say the bad. I'm going to say the challenge has got to do a lot with timing, and timing starts with this is a bill, not a law. I believe it sits in front of 10 or 11 committees to be passed, which means
In the House.
In the House.
Yeah.
Which means we need a lot of congressional collaboration. It is bipartisan, but we need people to work together to make it a law. Then once it's a law, we need to figure out how we actually build the ship. So we have a bit of a challenge both in Congress today and the timing it's going to take to get there. That is going to be probably one of the biggest challenges before we actually see assets on the water.
But we can look forward to, I think, more information, right? As it comes out in the executive order, you have how many studies kicked off that says within 90 days, within 180 days, and then the big Maritime Action Plan due in November. which will help inform a lot of this and get to the path that what Josh was talking about, which I think is great stuff.
Which is why I framed it as a challenge, not a problem.
Yes.
But those study timelines don't look like anything's happening this year, because by the time you finish all those studies and they're digested, you're talking about the second year of this U.S. Congress, and in an election year, potentially a very contentious one. How does that play?
No, it's a good question, and I'll just offer one comment, is I don't think this industry needs more studies. We've been studying for 15 years. It's time for action. You have to move at the pace of relevance here now. If you've got a problem and identify it, start moving forward. Another study is just a waste. It's kicking the can.
Yeah.
Look at the National Maritime Strategy, it was mentioned before. Initiated in 2006, unfortunately issued in March of 2020, which also another event hit in March of 2020. But it was fundamentally 4 chapters with 6 underlying questions.
Right.
It took 6 years to come up with that. Now, my high schooler could do that. We know what we need to do. We need to get it documented, and we need to get it in an action plan and start moving it forward instead of just having great meetings that we talk.
It's all about money. We all know that. It's all about the money, because the proposals are, as I've said to other audiences, the menu is set. Where's the money?
Well, hopefully from this room and the people outside these doors chatting in the coffee break room, but part of it also, I think we're going to have to establish some guardrails. So we need the yards to be profitable in order to keep this going. We need new yards. But we're going to need some guardrails around yards and pricing and how this works. I've never heard of a government program where the government's going to put money in, whether it's stipend, subsidy, or anything else, and the price goes down. So we're going to need to figure out, as an industry collaborating with shipyards, how do we do this competitively, and how do we do this competitively with both private capital and government support?
And I would say just additionally that there is a tremendous amount of precedent globally with respect to financing as well as onshoring, otherwise flags of convenience into a national flag. French tax lease program was one of them. My colleague up here from Stena is doing the same thing at Stena Bulk right now with the Swedish flag state. So we can look to our allied nations and how they are doing it and learn from that process to facilitate the ease of transference. So hats off to those who have undertaken the process under their own flag state and at Stena into the US flag state as well. We must learn from those transactions. That's the only way we're going to make this easier and better, is to learn from our esteemed colleagues and how it could be done better.
Eric, you want to talk about the Swedish program?
I'm sorry, I did not follow what...
The
Swedish flag.
Yeah, the Swedish flag. Okay, yeah, we can talk about that. Just absolutely. Okay, what has happened in Sweden? I would say it's to some degree the same thing is happening here in US right now, and for various reasons, of course. But they simply make it easier to go in with Swedish flag, and we are changing a number of ships now as we speak. But a little bit back to your comment there and question. Looking from the outside, I definitely don't know all the details in the American Act here and the Shipping Act. But for the talk about here today, when you talk about subsidies and taxes and so on to get this going, looking at the history here, what I remember, that is how we killed the market in Europe. And that's why we don't have anything left in Europe either. So we have the same problem in Europe with both shipyards and workers and crews actually on board the ships, especially in Northern Europe. So in this respect, it is we have to work long term and really try to find ways here to get the right people to the shipyards and the ships again, because that's what really counts at the end of the day.
So the Ships Act has a very interesting mix of financial incentives, very much a good faith effort to make it all work, and tax incentives for the shipyards, tax incentives for the ship owners, various items. How's private capital going to fit into that mix? How do you guys see private capital coming into play in the building of ships in the United States and entering them into the new program?
Back to me. Well, I think the first starting point of this is, I don't know, and Charlie, you're the maritime historian in the room, but I don't know that we've seen a program where you make a financial application to the U.S. Maritime Administration based on an individual proposal. So for example, in the Maritime Security Program, Bill's container ships get the same exact stipend that our car carriers get, which is the same stipend that a multi-purpose vessel gets. But in the Ships for America Act, it's an individual application, which means there's going to be varying degrees of government support, and that means some entities could get rejected because they're trying to take too much government money. And so I think what we're going to have to do is find the right balance. The difficult part for all of us and all of you is we can't tell you what that balance is because we can't tell you who the maritime administrator is going to be in the next Congress, in the Congress after that, as we keep building out these vessels. And so there's a bit of uncertainty in how the capital will come into play and who will be accepted and rejected.
But Josh, you don't disagree that private capital is needed. In other words, this is not a public capital only type enterprise.
No, we're going to need private capital as well as some government support. I just think this is a unique program because you're making individual applications to participate in the program.
Bill?
No, I agree with everything Josh said. And the one thing that, from a ship owning perspective and operating, is you like to have a few ships that look alike. So if you put in an application, you get okay for one, and then the second one, they're like, no, not so good. And you're like, okay, where are we in this? So just things to work through, but I think that it's there. Private equity is involved today in the industry. It's just knowing the rules of the road, looking at the exact cost and the process. And taking a risk assessment to it.
I think that's a good point that probably Hanwha would like to see as well as other yards.
Series
We
build.
need series construction.
You don't want one LNG, you want a series of them.
You want series construction. Yeah.
I would say additionally, I agree with all of that. I think what we are, at least with our ACP programmed LNG carriers or programming, we want the charterer, the user of the ship, to have an agnosticism. So we want to make sure that the subsidy, the uniqueness and the bespoke nature of it, that it is facilitating export on vessels whereby the arbitrage function is true and honest. Anybody who's exporting LNG, perhaps they don't have an obligatory condition of export permits, but they do have a desire. And so that's almost stronger than the obligation of a DOA export authorization. So we're very excited about that. Now, to be a 501 citizen, U.S. citizenship test under flag state, it's hard. It requires the ultimate beneficial owner to be of U.S. capital. Now, as we all know in this room, that's not always traditional in terms of maritime finance. So that's the opportunity set for the tax investors, the private equity and infrastructure investors in the USA. And so I think there is going to be a place, but what that misses is the crewing standards. So I really would encourage everybody in this room to sort of speak to your agents, your manning organizations, and find a way where we can work together to put American mariners on the global trading fleet of LNG carriers today. We'll get them up to crew matrix standards so there isn't a concern with respect to the Totals and the ExxonMobils of the world and their compliance on TMSA audit. We're very focused on that.
I've heard some union people say that it's much easier to recruit when the industry is expanding, which is probably a truism, and versus an industry that's static. Is that correct? You guys see, in other words, if the industry starts to explode and we're building ships left and right, will we really have trouble finding people? Or will that be the moment when we'll find plenty of people?
Well, I think that goes in general. If you see an industry that is booming, it will definitely be easier, and of course they can attract good talents as well. And the shape of the job in the past and probably today is going to be much different in the future as well. I'm pretty sure of with probably less crews and so on board and more automatic. So it's going to be. Hopefully and probably, is something that attracts the young talents.
I see Willie in the front row here. If you talk about bringing people to the industry, it's a long time to become master.
Yeah.
It's a long time to become chief engineer. So this is back to managing that system of systems that says if the ship is built in year X, how far back in the pipeline do I have to go to make sure that mariner is attracted to the industry? So you've got to show that flag out in the future that says this is a good place to be. But you're talking about a long time to get up to where you say, okay, here's the keys to the vessel. There's one thing I wanted to just double back on for a second.
Sure.
When you asked about the role of private equity in this, and it comes back to the fundamental differences between domestic and international shipping. Because we talk a lot about the cost side here. We're talking about what does it cost to produce a ship, what are the technologies you can put in, et cetera, et cetera. It's a different revenue model when you look at the international trade. You're going from call it intra-regional, United States-based, to international. So the volumes are bigger, right? You're not just trading up and down the coast, you're trading between two geographies separated by 45 days, what do I know? It's commoditized, and that commoditized brings in volatility into it. That volatility can be good, as you've seen probably in the last few years of results for a lot of the international companies. It could also go the other way. It depends on where it is. So as we look forward into how we're going to make this happen, and I truly do think we're going to make something great happen, we've got to take both sides into the equation, not just look at the cost side, but also what are the dynamics associated with the revenue production and everything.
So I was going to take it back to workforce for just a second, a little bit of recognition. Willie from American Maritime Officers Union is here. So the American Maritime Labor Unions are here in the room with us. When we look at mariner strategy, it takes 10 years to become a master, say. I think you don't see commercials on TV, outreach programs. Our industry has gone out, we're going to the Guidance Counselors Society programs to get guidance counselors to talk to students in high school about becoming mariners. What we need as a next step there is we need to see national advertisement, national outreach so that people are aware of our industry, but the more we build, the more awareness will come with it.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if anybody on the panel believes that there is sufficient shipyard capacity in the United States today to build 250 ships. If you think so, tell me. So that being the case, where is the new capacity going to come from? I know Hanwha has plans to expand in Philly, right? But where's the brand new shipyard? Where's the, opening up, reopening up Avondale again? Like someone said to me, well, Avondale is now a place where there's a prison and a casino, a perfect place for a shipyard. I mean, is that where? California, NASCO is constrained, and so on. Bath is constrained, Ingalls is constrained, physically constrained.
I think your observations are correct and fairly undisputable at this point in time. You've got to balance the commercial and the naval side. I think we heard Hanwha talk about before rebalancing their commercial portfolio. David just before us, right, said that maybe too overbalanced on the commercial side, wants to bring in some of that naval. So you have this dual use, and I can't ignore the fact that the Navy wants to get up to 381 ships has been put forward. They're not there today. That's good work. That's big work. I mean, if you land an aircraft carrier, I've got an office out in Norfolk. I keep seeing them sitting there for years and years. So the potential exists to start new. Go back to, again, the 40s, when you're pumping out 4,000 ships over the course of 4 years. All right, SpaceX will draw emotions, but the first thing that they do is they put the people who build it next to the people who design it from day one and say, how do we make this the most efficient and effective thing so the output looks like the design? And you may have to explore greenfield opportunities in getting there because you can crank out that many more ships because you've had that planning, you've had that mental exercise gone into aligning design and production from day one.
I would echo that greenfield production is going to be the key because let's face it, high density population centers are not conducive to growth. Okay, of course, growth within a certain capacity, but not sort of hundreds and hundreds of acres of growth as we have at Okpo. Now, that's going to involve both a federal mandate, but also a state and local mandate. Tends to be, I'm very proud to be living in Texas these days, a lot of engineering opportunity. We at Hanwha are an engineering company, in fact, and also happens to be that there's a growth cycle in LNG. There's a lot of correlation between pull on that labor force. So it's also not easy, even in otherwise disparate and land robust areas. So it is going to take a village, both from the federal, state, and local push points. But also, we need to be clever. We need to look down the supply chain and look at the modularity. What can we assemble in the middle of the country and move on truck and rail and support the intermodal transportation capabilities we have as a nation? How can we do that?
Or what are the roles of partners and allies too?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, we do some of that work today. It comes in from overseas, and what can you get in exchange for that? Can you get from, I know with all due respect to Sweden, Finland, can they build you an icebreaker? I mean, they build a lot of them every year. How does that work into this whole trade balance and negotiations and help you become more efficient?
I would present a slightly different perspective on the greenfield side. I totally agree that we need to modularize shipping, look at what partners can provide. I get concerned personally about the greenfield experience. We look at the dominance from China. Greenfield didn't work. most of those greenfield yards in China never happened, or if you had orders there, they did not come out with quality. And so I do think looking to the middle of the country, modularized intermodal transport to get to yards is probably the way to go, or we need to rethink how we build ships, and we need to integrate some national and economic partners that we have to build certain component parts prefabricated, and that's going to change. That's going to require some changes to our shipbuilding laws in this country.
So one of the relatively innovative things in the Ships Act is it encourages joint bidding by ship owners and shipyards. Hanwha, you're sort of living the dream on that one, I think. So Ryan, you can go first, which is, how's that going to work?
Well, certainly it looks like it almost was written for us, but I promise you it was written well before we bought Philadelphia. You know, in one way it's good, and in another way it's complex. You know very well that when you're making a petition to MARAD, you want to make sure that each operating entity is unique and separable. You don't want to see them, one, be disadvantaged because of an advantage of the other. Now, we stand here as Hanwha Shipping, the ship owner, to support our shipyards. That's our reason for being, if you will. So we would never want our MARAD petition to come ahead of something that they would otherwise receive from the shipyard grant at some point. So that's a systems of equation that we are managing. We like the idea that we can bid with our team. You know, practically we work together every day anyway. But it is something.
You don't feel like you're competing though with your customers when you're doing that?
No, but this is also precisely why that as I said, our shipyards, they have to exist on their own. They are their own operating business. Although we have the same principle, you know, there are different labor pools, there are different ecosystems of awareness and operating capabilities. So we don't want 1 + 1 to equal 1. It has to equal 3 if we're involved. And so that's why it's an important system of equation for us to manage. The shipyard will always be open to the third-party customer. It will sometimes be open to us, and that's our standard. Customer comes first.
I would think that as the Ships for America Act evolves, while they have this joint bidding incentive or mission, that is, again, going to have to be highly regulated due to some of the private capital. You know, how could Liberty be disadvantaged by not choosing to use Hanwha Shipping and going alone and not getting the priority slot, or having production fall on its vessel while Hanwha's vessels for its commercial shipping company happen? And I think that's just a perspective that is going to have to evolve with the legislation.
It's delicate. Suppose both of us drove up to Philly and said, okay, we're going to design the next gen of Ro-Ros. And you said, okay, come on, you go in room A, you go in room B.
Did we just form a JV?
Exactly. I think
Mike,
we just
we'll
did
be
it
a part of
the day. I think there's actually space for this as you move up the value chain and things can become more sophisticated and bespoke, and you're not trying to stamp out something in a serial build that may be more commoditized. If it's more specialized and they want a series of 3 or 4, whatever it is, rock droppers, I know you're building stuff like that.
Well, to my mind, my own opinion, that's a central issue in all of this, which is it's not designed to produce series construction, to my mind.
Yeah.
It may result in series construction, but it's not designed to produce series construction, which, again, to my mind, is not a positive thing.
Yeah.
Erik, you wanted to say something.
No, I mean, with Hanwha, I mean, great ambitions, and it's interesting to follow for sure. But nevertheless, you know, it depends on what kind of market we are now getting into, and what kind of contracts you're getting. I mean, American flagships are not competitive in the international market. Simple as that, you know. And you know, we have to find a way there. To make that work as well in the long term, which is, well, that's a long run as well. It's not over a few years, it's longer than that.
It's hard, and listen, at our vessels we're building at Akpo, we go through this every day. We only stand in when it's required for business continuity reasons. There's a ship, if there's a berth that isn't otherwise ordered, but it would mean sending labor back home and maybe not getting them, you know, that's a worse outcome scenario than us ordering a ship on our own account. So that's the only reason for us to be, is to make sure we have labor continuity and we create our own demand signal when the third-party customer does not. And that's our core foundation. And it's important. It's all about labor.
So can I ask you each to be a little bit of a political analyst and answer the question, so realistic or not realistic to get Ships Act this year?
You said this year, do you mean this fiscal year that ends in October? Or ends in
Calendar.
September?
My answer.
Calendar year. Realistic or not? You guys can waffle, it's okay.
Well, I guess it's either one, huh? But no, I think I'm carefully pessimistic.
Uh-oh.
Well, as a U.S. owner and operator, we have to be optimistic because,
Rachel,
again, I
you still
started by
here?
saying we're talking about maritime. But I think that there's a lot of challenges. Like I said, there's multiple committees and jurisdictions, even just in the House, to get this done. If it does get done, does the president sign it as written? That's another question to ask. And so we're cautiously optimistic about this, but I think that, again, we're talking about maritime, and that's the important part right now.
When you bring something to the floor, it never looks at the end like it looks at the beginning. So it's, what does that process look like? I do think there is a will, as described by Senator Kelly earlier, before bipartisan, bicameral, in getting this. I do think also with the pressure of the executive order coming in, that something will happen this calendar year. What that something looks like, I don't know, but I do think there'll be some substance behind it.
Right?
I think I learned a great lesson when I played hockey once upon a time. You score early and you score often. So I think I really would encourage the outcome. Do I believe within the next year? Yes, within the next year. But I think we have to make early wins and make them often. Maritime Action Plan will come out before November. I think everybody's got to hit their Congress people. I think you got to go talk to staff and on the committee side as well. We've got to work through the budget. We've got to work the defense side, executive, early and often, and that's the approach that we at Hanwha take.
So I kind of already asked this question, but I'll let you recap with, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the opportunities in the U.S. flag industry? You can pick your timeline, this year, next year. Let's go down the line. Ryan, we'll start with you, closing out.
He's been optimism all day.
Yeah, I'm so
I
optimistic.
know.
I
Now's
testified
not
at
the time to waffle.
I told the USTR committee that, I've been waiting for this damn moment for 22 years of my career, so very optimistic. And as Hanwha, speaking on behalf of Hanwha as well.
Yeah, equally. Again, been at this game over 3 decades, and this is a moment in time when I think we finally have the attention that people care what you are. The starting of that was probably the COVID crisis and the supply chain bottleneck, where everybody saw the picture, at least, of ships idle out of Los Angeles and said the entire economy is dependent upon this industry. That was good for elevating the priority, for trying to get that will behind everything. So I'm actually very optimistic that something good is going to come from this for the industry.
Josh?
So since you asked it already, I'm going to give a slightly different approach to this. I think this is a moment when, we're all here on some unusual terms with Jim passing. I think, what would Jim Lawrence think? And Jim Lawrence was the ultimate optimist. And so I would say that we should all be optimistic about this.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we are 3 optimists here, but I think I stick to that as well then. But it's I mean, the opportunities will continue to come here, and the machine has to continue to work, as simple as that. And by that, of course, there's going to be opportunities within the system as well.
So I get the last word, and the phrase I have heard, it may be very obvious to all of you, is the problems are great, but we have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. And that's what I believe in, which is that if we all just throw up our hands and say there's not enough shipyards and there's not enough mariners, not enough shipyard workers, not enough money, not enough of anything, then we're going to do anything, which is what we've been doing for 50 years. So we have to start somewhere. With that, thank you very much to the panel.